Welcome back to the Deep Dive, where we take the sources you share with us and distill them down to the pure, potent insights you need. Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into the life, the legend, and maybe most importantly, the actual sound of Keith Richards.
We've been provided with uh, a really rich, detailed biography covering his whole six-decade career, and our mission here is, I think, absolutely crucial. We need to look past that iconic image, the celebrated chain-smoking outlaw, and find the disciplined, meticulous musical architect who is, at the end of the day, responsible for the core sound of the Rolling Stones.
Exactly, because when you ask people to describe Keith Richards, the persona that immediately springs to mind is one of chaos, right? Rock and roll abandon and just this utter countercultural defiance. But when you start reading through the sources, you find this massive foundational contradiction
Uh,
that the revolutionary music he created is built on technical discipline, highly specific instrumentation, and a respect for musical history that is far more structured than his public life ever suggested.
And that duality, I think, is the center of this entire deep dive. How can one man embody both the figure described by journalist Nick Kent, using Lord Byron's famous line,
Oh, the mad, bad, and dangerous to no one.
that's the one. How can he be that guy while simultaneously serving as the rigorous, stabilizing force in the studio, the primary producer, and the unshakable rhythmic core of, well, the greatest rock and roll band in history? We have to unpack how the architect and the outlaw coexist.
So let's do it. Let's unpack this fascinating contradiction starting right at the very beginning, because the seeds of this duality were planted long, long before he ever even picked up an electric guitar. Keith Richards was born in 1943 in Dartford, Kent. This is in the middle of World War II. But if you look at his parents, and especially his grandparents, you find this incredible push and pull of influences, a contrast that seems to set the stage for his whole life.
Well, you see a very traditional, very working class background on his father's side. His dad, Herbert William Richards, was a factory worker. He was wounded during the Normandy invasion and was, by all accounts, pretty dismissive of his son's artistic dreams. A classic post-war, pragmatic working environment.
But then you turn to his maternal side, the Dupree family, and it's like a different world. You find this powerful, almost oppositional current of progressive thought and civic dedication. We're talking about a family that was deeply invested in the community structure.
Precisely. His maternal grandparents, Ernie and Eliza Richards, were key figures in local politics. They were committed socialists and were instrumental in establishing the Walthamstow Labour Party. And the sources note this incredible detail that his grandmother, Eliza Richards, actually served as the mayor of the municipal borough of Walthamstow in 1941.
A female mayor in 1941.
Yeah, I mean, that's a huge civic commitment. It's a dedication to a highly structured public life.
And that context is so vital because it immediately pushes back against this idea that Richards just sprang from pure chaos. He had this deep, structured civic heritage, even if he didn't end up following that specific path.
And musically, that structure was channeled through probably the most crucial figure in his early life.
Yeah.
His maternal grandfather, Augustus Theodore Gus Dupree.
Gus.
Gus, he was a professional musician, a jazz big band leader who toured Britain with his group Gus Dupree and his boys.
Yeah.
And this exposed young Keith to a completely different sonic world than what was, popular in post-war Britain.
So it wasn't just rudimentary folk music he was hearing. He was absorbing the complex textures of American jazz giants. Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Billie Holiday. That's a really sophisticated early musical diet. And Gus is the source of that foundational guitar story, which I think perfectly illustrates this theme of effort and reward.
It's such a wonderful anecdote. Gus didn't just hand him the instrument. He would tease him with it, keeping it strategically placed on a high shelf that young Keith just couldn't reach. It was like a test of dedication.
He had to earn it.
He had to earn it. Richards recounts that he had to devise these elaborate, almost engineering-like ways to get to it, stacking books and cushions precariously on a chair just to have a chance.
So he didn't just receive the prize, he had to literally plot and climb for it. What was the first thing Gus taught him once he finally earned the right to touch it?
His very first tune was Malagueña, that classic, challenging Spanish instrumental piece.
Wow, that's not Three Blind Mice.
Not at all. And this is crucial because it's not a simple blues scale or a three-chord trick. It requires real dexterity and focus. He was required to work on it like mad until he mastered the basic rudiments. Only then did Gus officially let him keep the guitar, which Richards later called the prize of the century.
That early tension, this his father disparaging the music as just noise while his grandfather demanded diligence and fostered his passion, that really established the pattern of Richards needing to fight for his creative space. It gives you a real sense of where his stubbornness and his commitment to craft come from.
And speaking of early patterns, the sources remind us of the highly localized world they all inhabited. Richards attended Wentworth Primary School with Mick Jagger. He was his literal neighbor until 1954.
The two future legends, these Glimmer twins, lived just around the corner from each other. But the true destiny-defining moment happened years later after Richards had already demonstrated his rebellious streak. He got expelled from Dartford Technical High School for truancy, though he did redeem himself somewhat by attending Sidcup Art College, which is where he met future Rolling Stone Dick Taylor.
And then comes the famous re-meeting by absolute chance on the platform at Dartford Railway Station in 1961. Richard spotted Jagger carrying something very, very specific. Mail-order R&B albums from Chess Records. We were talking about seminal works by Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and of course, Chuck Berry.
That detail about the records being the catalyst is so key, isn't it? It wasn't just a friendly hello. It was the revelation of a shared, intensely specific passion for American blues that, cemented their bond.
It was the spark. That mutual obsession quickly led to the formation of their first amateur band, Little Boy Blue and the Blue Boys, which rapidly evolved into the core of the Rolling Stones. It's a potent reminder that the foundation of one of the greatest songwriting partnerships in history was built entirely on a shared, deep love for that specific genre of music.
Before we move on to his technical innovations, we have to pause for two facts about his early life that are almost too unbelievable for the future rock outlaw. First, the choir boy.
Yes. Richards' early talent was recognized by the choir master at Dartford Tech, and he was recruited to sing as a boy soprano. He performed in a trio at extremely prestigious events, including singing for Queen Elizabeth II at Westminster Abbey. This went on until, adolescence naturally changed his voice.
A boy soprano at Westminster Abbey transitioning into the man who would define rock and roll excess. You just couldn't write it. And then there's the name change.
Right. So after the Stones signed their deal in 1963, their manager, Andrew Loog Oldham, who was absolutely instrumental in packaging the band as the anti-Beatles, decided Richards' name just wasn't pop enough.
Oldham advised him to drop the Zez and become Keith Richard.
The intention was completely manufactured. Oldham thought the name looked cleaner in print, was easier to market, and this is the key part, deliberately echoed the successful British rock and roll singer Cliff Richard, which flies directly in the face of the whole authenticity and brutes persona that Richards later built his entire legend on.
And for you, the listener, this detail is a huge insight. For nearly 15 years, the man who epitomized rock authenticity was going by a stage name that was essentially a pop industry fabrication. Our sources confirm he only formally switched back to Richards in 1978. It speaks volumes about the early pressure to, conform to an image. Now we get to the core of the architect persona. We are moving from the chaotic image to the hyper-specific mechanics of his sound. His approach to the guitar is the absolute antithesis of the guitar hero cult that emerged in the late 60s and 70s.
Oh, he deliberately rejected it. He rejected that whole movement toward competitive virtuosity. Richards didn't want to be the fastest gun in the West. His philosophy was purely focused on the rhythm, the chord, the groove. He aimed for playing that was direct, incisive, and completely unpretentious. He saw flashy solos as, unnecessary fluff.
And the defining element of the Stones' guitar work is what he termed wonderfully the ancient art of weaving.
This is the genius of the Richards sound. It's a technique drawn directly from the structure of Chicago blues bands and particularly soul music. Instead of having a rigid lead player and a rigid rhythm player, Richards and his counterpart, whether it was Brian Jones, Mick Taylor, or Ronnie Wood, would seamlessly interlock their parts. They'd weave them together to create a single massive moving texture.
It's often described as one player stepping in just as the other steps out, or sometimes both are playing rhythm and then both momentarily step into a little lead phrase. It's incredibly dynamic. And the sources confirm that especially during periods of internal turbulence, Richards often handled all of this weaving himself in the studio.
Absolutely. When Brian Jones's contributions became inconsistent in the late 60s, Richards had to become the sole structural backbone of the band. Tracks like Paint It Black, Ruby Tuesday, Sympathy for the Devil, and Gimme Shelter. These are all examples where Richards meticulously laid down every single guitar part himself. It demonstrates that the structural core of the Stones was him. The Outlaw was, in reality, a painstaking studio craftsman.
And here's where the technical dive gets really revealing. His innovation with open tunings, which is the foundational secret to his signature sound. We're talking about the famous 5-string open G tuning.
This experimentation really took off during a deliberate break the band took around 1967-1968. He was looking for a tuning that just felt inherently rhythmic. His preferred setup, the open G, is GD-GBD. It's a highly resonant, very powerful tuning.
But the key modification, the self-imposed limitation, is that he physically removes the low, thick E string entirely from the guitar. It's not just tuned differently, it's gone.
Correct. The sources quote him explaining that the lowest string just gets in the way. By removing it, he forces the guitar to operate in a higher, more syncopated register. He believes the lowest notes are the job of the bass player, Bill Wyman or Darryl Jones, to handle. This limitation, a 5-string guitar derived from a 6-string body, is what forces that characteristic syncopated ringing sound that is instantly identifiable as the Stones.
It's fascinating because he took inspiration for this open G tuning, the bedrock of his rock sound, directly from the banjo, a country instrument.
It's all about finding unexpected influences and repurposing them. Once he had this tuning, the riffs that followed weren't merely guitar parts, they were rhythmic declarations. You think about Honky Tonk Women, Brown Sugar, and the relentless drive of Start Me Up. None of their songs sound the same without the open G 5-string secret. It's a really unusual approach that created a completely original, non-virtuosic, but utterly compelling sound.
And if you're a listener who has ever tried to play those riffs on a standard tuned guitar, you know they sound completely wrong. That tuning isn't just a stylistic choice, it's a structural necessity.
Absolutely. The structure is king. And Richards believes the starting point for that structure is always the acoustic guitar. He considered it the foundation of his technique, admitting he feared he would lose that touch if he relied solely on electric instruments.
We hear the acoustic prominently on softer tracks like Angie or Play with Fire, but the sources reveal a mind-boggling production technique where the acoustic guitar was actually the key to creating some of the Stones' most brutally distorted heavy rock tracks.
This is a perfect example of his creative craftsmanship. We're talking about the famous gnarly riffs on Street Fighting Man and Jumpin' Jack Flash. They sound massive and electric, but their core sound was generated by Richards playing an acoustic guitar and then intentionally overloading that sound into a cheap, low-fidelity cassette recorder.
So he's purposely driving the cheap circuitry of a cassette machine into distortion.
Exactly. Then, that raw, distorted signal from the cassette player was reamped. They routed it through a loudspeaker and mic'd that loudspeaker in the studio. This bizarre, multi-stage lo-fi process created a completely unique, highly compressed, and aggressively distorted tone that high-end studio gear just couldn't replicate. It was a revolutionary use of technology against itself.
That just screams creative genius driven by pure curiosity. Now let's pivot to the songwriting partnership, Jagger Richards. The Source's credit manager, Andrew Loog Oldham, back in 1963 for pushing them to write, noting the band couldn't afford to keep relying on outside material.
Right, and their initial success as songwriters didn't even go to the Rolling Stones. They were proving their ability to write pop hits for other people first. Their first collaboration to hit the UK top 10 was Gene Pitney's That Girl Belongs to Yesterday. They also famously wrote Marianne Faithfull's debut single, the delicate ballad As Tears Go By.
So they were mastering the craft of songwriting by feeding the pop machine before they mastered writing for their own distinct voice. The Stones' breakthrough with original material finally came in 1965 with The Last Time, followed quickly by the international phenomenon, I Can't Get No Satisfaction.
And the legend of Satisfaction is so revealing of Richards' process. He woke up in the middle of the night, reaching for the cassette player he wisely kept by his bed. The riff, the rhythm, and the title phrase just popped into his head. He recorded it and immediately fell back asleep. He wasn't even sure if he'd captured anything coherent until he woke up later that morning and listened back.
That anecdote reinforces his profound songwriting philosophy. He doesn't really claim ownership of the music, does he?
No, he views himself as an antenna or a conduit, not a divine creator. The sources relay his statement. I prefer to think of myself as an antenna. There's only one song, and Adam and Eve wrote it. The rest is a variation on a theme. It's an incredibly humble yet powerful view of the creative process, suggesting the great riffs are merely intercepted, not manufactured.
So if he's just intercepting the universal song, then his dedication to the technical craft, the 5-string, the acoustic bass, the meticulous weaving, that must be the means by which he fine-tunes his receiver.
Exactly. The constraint allows for the channeling. And before we move on, let's just circle back to his vocal contributions. It's easy to forget that Westminster Abbey background when you hear his rough-hewn voice today.
He has been a consistent presence on backing vocals on every single Stones album, but his signature lead vocal spots in concerts, which became standard around the Between the Buttons era, they serve a secondary purpose beyond just showcasing his voice.
They're strategically placed in the set list, usually one or two songs like Happy or Connection.
Mm-hmm.
And the primary practical reason for this, which is confirmed by the sources, is that it gives Mick Jagger a guaranteed 5-minute break for a quick outfit and makeup change backstage. It's a moment of efficient stage logistics.
And the tradition for his intro is always the same, that self-deprecating ritualistic introduction, often a Max Miller routine, starting with the classic line.
It's nice to be here. It's nice to be anywhere.
Right. It's a moment of genuine warmth and self-mockery in the middle of all that stadium chaos. Moving into Richards' career outside of the main band structure, we have to recognize his role as a producer. Since the mid-1970s, he and Jagger have taken on primary production responsibilities, famously credited as the Glimmer Twins.
That Glimmer Twins moniker reflected their dual control over the sound and, the band's creative direction. But Richards' expertise wasn't just limited to Stones records. He accumulated significant production credits, including for iconic figures like Aretha Franklin and the legendary blues pianist Johnny Johnson.
And there's a surprising piece of early production history involving a band called Cracker.
Yes, in 1973, Richards and Jagger developed an interest in this band, and Cracker's second album gained the distinction of being the very first non-Stones band licensed on the Rolling Stones records label for distribution outside the U.S. It demonstrated an early entrepreneurial spirit to support the kind of music that they valued.
And we also see his deep love for reggae and world music. He even co-produced and added guitar and vocals to Wingless Angels. That's a 1997 album of Rastafarian Nyabingi drumming and chanting, released on his own Mindless Records label. It's a testament to his musical curiosity that extended far beyond the blues.
And that curiosity really reached its zenith during the period when Mick Jagger was pursuing his solo career, which created this massive creative void within the Stones structure. This prompted Richards to form his own celebrated side project, the Expensive Winos, in 1987.
The formation of the Winos was almost a competitive response, wasn't it? Yet the sources show it was incredibly creatively fulfilling for Richards. He co-founded the band with drummer and co-producer Steve Jordan, who he'd originally assembled to back Chuck Berry for the documentary Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll.
The Winos were an exceptionally tight, really formidable unit. The lineup included Waddy Washful on guitar, the late, great Bobby Keys on saxophone, Ivan Neville on keys, and Charlie Drayton on bass. What's crucial here is that working with Steve Jordan, who co-produced their first album, Talk Is Cheap, allowed Richards to explore a different kind of collaborative dynamic than the one he had with Jagger. It was less fraught, more centered on a shared rhythmic vision.
And Talk Is Cheap was a success. It went gold, and it proved he could command a spotlight and a creative unit entirely on his own terms. He followed that up with two more strong studio albums, Main Offender and Cross-Eyed Heart in 2015.
The Winos era provides critical insight into the architect side of his personality. While the outlaw image was often defined by his friction with Jagger, the Winos showed him as a clear, effective bandleader, driving the sound with efficiency and deep respect for his players.
Beyond his own solo band, his collaborative list reads like a rock and roll fantasy camp. We have to talk about the Dirty Mac.
The Dirty Mac, yes. That legendary supergroup assembled for the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus TV special back in 1968. The lineup alone is just staggering. You've got John Lennon, Eric Clapton, Mitchell of the Jimi Hendrix Experience, and Richards.
And Richards was playing bass for this group, backing up Lennon. That's a powerful illustration of his musical adaptability. He was comfortable dropping his Telecaster, picking up the 4-string, and just serving as the rhythmic anchor for a group of absolute powerhouses.
It confirmed that his focus was always on the groove and the rhythmic structure, regardless of the instrument in his hands. He also formed a very deep and fruitful partnership with Tom Waits, starting in the mid-1980s.
A perfect creative pairing, given their shared love of grit and authenticity. Richards contributed guitar and backing vocals to Waits' landmark 1985 album Rain Dogs.
And their collaboration only deepened from there. For Waits' 1992 album Bone Machine, Richards was a co-writer. He played on it. And he shared the raw, soulful, laid vocal duties on the track that feel. He also contributed guitar and vocals to Waits' 2011 album, Bad As Me, I mean, two artists just shared a creative language rooted in the history of American music.
And his global influences continued to surface, especially in reggae. He played on Max Romeo's album in 1981 and crucially contributed guitar and vocals to Toots and the Maytals' recording of Careless Ethiopians.
And that specific track was included on the 2004 Toots and the Maytals album True Love, which won the Grammy Award for Best Reggae Album. His contributions demonstrate his respect for the roots artists that inspired him, a long-standing tradition he maintained throughout his career.
All of this output, the Stones, the Winos, the collaborations, is apparently just the fraction of the iceberg that's visible.
Richards himself has stated this: the released material is just the tip of the iceberg. And this sheer volume of unreleased material has naturally fueled widespread bootlegging amongst fans. We see specific examples mentioned in the sources, including extensive bootleg tapes from his 1977 Toronto studio sessions and recordings made during his 1983 wedding trip to Mexico.
It speaks to a man who truly operates with a constant musical engine, just channeling and recording ideas endlessly. The vastness of this unreleased archive only serves to underscore his nonstop role as the antenna he describes himself as. We've built up a strong case for Richards the Architect, but for decades the public knew him only as Richards the Outlaw. Now we have to address the enduring countercultural shadow that overshadowed his musicianship for so long.
Well, the image was defined by drug use and legal troubles, starting almost immediately in the mid-60s. Mick Jagger once mused that Richards' image was so powerful it may have even contributed to him becoming a junkie. And Richards later admitted that the outlaw image cast a long shadow that dictated public perception long after he began to change his lifestyle.
Let's detail the two major legal struggles that really cemented this image, starting with the infamous 1967 Redlands bust. It became a landmark moment in the clash between the counterculture and the British establishment.
So the raid occurred at his Sussex estate in February 1967. The police found several people present, including Mick Jagger and Marianne Faithfull. Jagger's charged with possession of amphetamine tablets, and Richards faced the more severe charge of allowing cannabis to be smoked on his property.
The sentences handed down by the courts were astonishingly harsh for the time. Jagger received 3 months in prison, Richards received a full year. Both were immediately incarcerated. Richards was taken to Wormwood Scrubs, Jagger to Brixton.
They were released on bail the next day, pending appeal. But what is truly profound here is the public reaction, particularly the response from the mainstream press. The establishment newspaper, The Times, ran a stunning editorial that changed the entire narrative.
The editorial was titled, "Who Breaks a Butterfly Upon a Wheel?" It was a direct quote from Alexander Pope, essentially arguing that the severity of the sentences was far greater than the crimes themselves, a symbolic persecution of the counterculture.
And that single piece of journalism swung public sentiment overwhelmingly in their favor. A month later, the convictions were overturned or reduced on appeal. Richards' conviction was thrown out due to lack of evidence, and Jagger received a conditional discharge. The power of public opinion in this case was undeniably decisive.
That incident set the precedent, but the most serious legal threat of his life came a decade later with the 1977 Toronto arrest.
This was far more dangerous. While Richards was staying at the Harbour Castle Hilton, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police found a significant quantity of heroin in his hotel room. He was charged with possession of heroin for the purpose of trafficking.
And the sources confirmed the severity of that charge in Canada at the time was immense. It carried the threat of potentially 7 years to life in prison. He lived under this severe criminal sanction for 2 years, even while working on the album Some Girls and touring North America.
It's hard to overstate the professional and personal peril he was facing. His career could have ended overnight. The eventual resolution, however, was highly unusual and deeply human.
The charge was reduced to simple possession. After pleading guilty, he received a suspended sentence and probation, with an order to continue treatment. But the condition that saved him was the testimony of a blind fan.
Yes, a fan testified on his behalf, suggesting that Richards had been kind and considerate to them over the years. This resulted in the judge ordering Richards to perform a benefit concert for the Canadian National Institute for the Blind, the CNIB, as part of his probation.
A unique exchange of criminal penalty for artistic service.
Exactly. He fulfilled that order, performing 2 CNIB benefit shows in Oshawa in 1979, featuring the Rolling Stones and his side project, the New Barbarians. This episode perfectly illustrates how the outlaw's fame and personal connections ultimately shaped his legal destiny.
Moving past the legal battles, Richards has been pretty candid about his later partial reversion to substances, though he did evolve.
No.
In 2016, he was quoted admitting he still occasionally enjoys alcohol, hashish, and cannabis, but as confirmed by our sources, he successfully quit smoking entirely in 2020.
Let's turn to his personal relationships. His relationship with the model and actress Anita Pallenberg lasted from 1967 to 1979.
A famously intense relationship, and it began while Pallenberg was still involved with Richards' bandmate Brian Jones, which the sources know deeply affected Jones. It added another layer of complexity and tension to the early Stones dynamic. They had 3 children, Marlon, Dandelion Angela, and Tara Jogun Richards.
Sadly, in 1976, their son Tara died from SIDS. Richards was on tour in the middle of a massive stadium run when he received the devastating news.
This tragedy is a defining moment. Richards famously chose to perform just hours after learning of Tara's death. He later explained that performing was the only way he felt he could cope, a form of profound, almost brutal devotion to his life's work. It sheds a lot of light on the monk-like dedication that underlies his chaotic exterior.
That sense of commitment really does define his life. His current marriage to model Patty Hansen is long-standing and very stable. He met her in 1979, and they married on his 40th birthday in 1983.
They have 2 daughters, Theodore Dupree and Alexandra Nicole. It's a lovely personal detail that Theodore's middle name, Dupree, is a tribute to his musical grandfather, Augustus Theodore Dupree. It brings the narrative full circle, right back to his foundational influences.
Of course, we can't discuss his personal life without addressing his enduring, very complicated relationship with Mick Jagger, frequently labeled by the media as love-hate.
Richards pulled no punches in his 2010 autobiography, Life, where he candidly referred to Jagger as unbearable and detailed decades of strained relations. That book was a seismic event in rock history. It forced the duo to publicly reconcile.
And while he later softened his stance by 2015, he maintained that while he loves Jagger dearly, he still views him as a snob. He characterizes their constant disagreements as a necessary family squabble, where he is the only one who has the nerve to challenge Jagger's decisions.
It's an essential dynamic, isn't it? The tension between the architect and the businessman. It's what keeps the band balanced and prevents them from stagnating creatively.
Absolutely. And finally, 2 humanizing anecdotes that truly highlight the duality of his character. First, the clumsy moment that almost ended his career prematurely, the 2006 head injury.
The famous coconut tree incident in Fiji. While vacationing, Richards climbed a coconut tree branch, slipped, fell, and sustained a head injury requiring emergency cranial surgery in New Zealand. This forced the Stones to delay their entire 2006 European tour for 6 weeks.
And he treated this near-death experience with characteristic irreverence, later joking in a video message that he left half my brain there. It's such an absurd image. The rock outlaw felled by tropical fruit.
And the final piece of surprising biographical information, the counterpoint to the outlaw image, is his private reality. He is an avid reader with an extensive library and a strong interest in history.
The ultimate contradiction is revealed in the sources. In 2010, Richards confessed that he harbored a secret ambition, one that completely defied his public image. He yearned to become a librarian.
The man who represents rock and roll chaos, having an ambition to preside over silence, order, and knowledge. That perfectly encapsulates the architect hiding inside the outlaw.
A librarian who also loves shepherd's pie, apparently with an intense dedication.
Indeed. The sources contain that marvelous anecdote of Richards confronting the Stereophonics drummer for daring to serve himself a portion of shepherd's pie that Richards had reserved. It shows that even the great outlaw draws a firm line when it comes to his favorite British comfort food. Let's transition now to how the outlaw image transitioned into a cultural archetype, starting with his surprising connection to the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise.
Well, Johnny Depp, when he was developing the character of Captain Jack Sparrow, specifically modeled the look, the mannerisms, the slurred speech pattern, loosely on a combination of Richards and the cartoon character Pepe Le Pew. The swagger, the rings, the slow, slinky movements, it was all Richards.
The inspiration was so direct that it led to Richards actually being cast in the franchise. He played Captain Edward Teague, Jack Sparrow's father, appearing at World's End in 2007 and on Stranger Tides in 2011.
It's a marvelous feedback loop. The rock and roll character who inspired the fictional pirate then came onto the screen to play his own progenitor. He even won a Scream Award for Best Cameo for the role. This solidified his status as a genuinely recognized cultural archetype beyond just music.
Now into the tools of the trade. The architect's instruments. Richards possesses an astonishing arsenal. The sources estimate his collection at approximately 3,000 guitars. But despite this vast quantity, he famously joked that he could make any of them sound exactly the same within 5 minutes.
That quote is critical because it tells us the sound isn't in the wood. It's in the hands, the technique, and the customization. Of all those 3,000 instruments, one guitar stands above all others, forever linked to his five-string method. Macabre.
Give us the deep dive on Macabre. Why is this 1953 Butterscotch Fender Telecaster his ultimate weapon?
Macabre is named after a perpetually optimistic character in Charles Dickens's David Copperfield. It is his most famous and relied upon instrument, instantly recognizable and purpose-built for the five-string open G tuning.
And it is a heavily customized Frankenstein guitar, right?
Yeah.
It's far from stock.
Oh, absolutely. The original bridge was replaced with an aftermarket brass bridge featuring individual saddles for better intonation, but critically, the saddle for the missing low E string is simply absent.
And the pickups are what truly define its sound, a blend of different eras and manufacturers.
Exactly. The neck pickup was replaced with a powerful Gibson PAF humbucker, known for its thick, warm tone, the type of sound Telecasters usually lack. The bridge pickup, however, was replaced with an older-style Fender lap steel pickup, similar to a broadcaster pickup, giving it a brittle, bright, and cutting edge. The combination allows Richards to instantly switch between a warm rhythm sound and a sharp, incisive riffing sound.
So it's a meticulously engineered instrument using 3 different manufacturers' parts, all customized for a banjo tuning. It is the perfect technical realization of the ancient art of weaving, and you can hear it prominently on hits like Brown Sugar and Honky Tonk Women.
And in addition to Macabre, the sources mention other key instruments, like his Gibson Les Paul Standard from 1959. That guitar holds historical significance, as it was considered the first high-profile, star-owned Les Paul in Britain before he sold it to Mick Taylor. He also frequently used a Gibson ES-355 and a TV yellow double cutaway Les Paul Jr., affectionately nicknamed Dice.
The technical specificity of his gear extends to his amp philosophy, which reveals a commitment to blending and volume control that again belies the image of reckless noise.
He is a longtime advocate for using low-powered amps in the studio. To achieve that signature blend of incisive clarity and distortion, his technique is to run 2 different amplifiers simultaneously. A larger amp, like a Fender Twin, running clean for headroom and foundation, blended with an overdriven low-powered amp, such as a Fender Champ, which provides the grit and compression.
That blending is what gives his rhythm playing its texture. It's never muddy, always incisive. Even decades later, he used a stock tweed Fender Champ, coupled with a modified Fender Harvard, to record his 3rd solo album, Cross-Eyed Heart, proving this approach is timeless for him.
That careful combination and blending, where low-fidelity tools are used to achieve high-impact results, is why he has been consistently lauded as the creator of rock's greatest single body of riffs.
And finally, the single moment of gear choice that revolutionized the guitar effects industry worldwide.
The iconic, buzzing, almost horn-like riff on I Can't Get No Satisfaction was achieved using a relatively new effect at the time, the Gibson Maestro Fuzzbox. The instant, massive global success of that single created a tsunami of demand.
We're talking about a huge industrial impact here.
Absolutely. The sources confronted the popularity of the song was so instantaneous and intense that it immediately boosted sales of the Gibson Maestro Fuzzbox, completely depleting all available stock worldwide by the end of 1965. A single riff changed the trajectory of guitar effects manufacturing forever.
That's a powerful legacy, and he has certainly received his share of formal honors, too. Rolling Stone magazine ranked him highly on their list of 100 best guitarists in 2011, placing him 4th, although he later slipped to 15th in their 2023 ranking.
And recognition continues to pour in. In 2023, a statue of Richards and Jagger was unveiled in Dartford, marking the site where they had that accidental, destiny-defining meeting on the train platform. And in 2025, he was the first recipient of the Connecticut Governor's Award of Excellence, acknowledging his residency and immense cultural impact.
That is a fitting capstone to a career that began as a history enthusiast and a choir boy in Kent and evolved into a global rhythmic innovator and cultural icon. So what does this all mean for you, the listener, seeking a shortcut to being well-informed about Keith Richards? We started with the central duality, the disciplined architect hiding behind the outlaw persona. Our deep dive into the sources shows that the most chaotic figure in rock history possesses the most organized and specific musical method, the ancient art of weaving, the use of low-powered blended amps, and the total commitment to the 5-string open G tuning.
The outlaw was the brand that sold the tickets and the records, but the architect was the substance that defined the sound. Richards is a master of deliberate constraint. He removes the string because it gets in the way, simplifying the physical limitations of the instrument to force himself into those highly rhythmic, syncopated, and resonant patterns.
And remember his profound view of himself as an antenna, channeling music because he believes there's only one song out there. If he's relying on the cosmos to provide the riffs, he needs the absolute best possible receiver to tune into that signal.
And here's the final provocative thought we leave you with, building on that antenna concept. Consider the profound paradox that the man famous for excess found his greatest creative flow through technical limitation. Is it possible that Richard's highly disciplined and focused reliance on the physical constraint of the five-string open G setup actually functions as the perfect, precisely focused tuning mechanism for that cosmic antenna to receive rock's greatest, simplest, and most eternal riffs?
Think about that. What other successful artists or innovators do you know who use self-imposed limitations, be it instrumentation, structural rules, or technological constraints? Not to limit, but to unlock a greater, purer, and more powerful form of creativity. That is the real, deeply technical secret of Keith Richards. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.